I'd like to maybe start from the beginning. You grew up in Egypt. Tell us about your view of Jews when you grew up and how pervasive that view is across the Arab world.
Sure. So I was born in 1989 in Giza, which we consider now a suburb of Cairo because Cairo grew to kind of include all the minor cities around it. And I received a very traditional education like everybody else in the society. And as for the view for Jews, it was extremely unfavorable across the different strata of society and across the different streams, whether nationalist or religious. Unfortunately, the view of Jews was extremely anti-Semitic. The way that Jews were portrayed, in popular culture, in movies, in books, in cartoons and newspapers, was always this very classical anti-Semitic image, which at the time I did not know that was anti-Semitic at all. I just thought that was reality, that was, what the world really looks like. So, for example, you get a newspaper and you just flip through it, and you're guaranteed to find some cartoon with like an ugly Jewish figure with the hooked nose that is controlling the world, holding the planet, or maybe having the United States as a puppet in their hand. In many religious sermons, Jews would be mentioned as those just rebellious, disobedient people who have incurred the wrath of God on them. In TV, it will, TV shows and movies, some of the best, unfortunately, TV shows and movies will introduce Jews as villains, Jews as those super villains who are constantly conspiring against Egypt, against, the Arab world, against the Muslim world. And that is just the view that everybody kind of generally accepted. Like, I remember there were even, movies or TV shows that the plot did not have anything to do with the Jews. Maybe it was like about drugs, some sort of a, gang or, a drug cartel that's trying to smuggle drugs somewhere. And many times at the end, you would discover that all of this was actually a Jewish conspiracy in order to smuggle drugs and corrupt people. So even when things did not directly have anything to do with the Jews, you would still find people indulging in this kind of ludicrous, neurotic, anti-Semitic fantasy. And, I actually, as a child, I loved that story because it's very powerful, especially for the mind of a child. It's full of fantasy. It tells you that the world, is not boring, that there is magic, that there is, a super villain in this world. There is a Lord Sauron. There is a Lord Voldemort, a Count Dracula. There is that, unimaginable evil that you can become a superhero by fighting. And me as a child, I loved that story. I obsessed over it. I obsessed over the idea how evil Jews are, how evil Israelis are. And of course, Israel was perceived as the complete embodiment of that, Jewish villainy and Jewish cancerous evil, kind of. Me personally, I really obsessed over those stories. I enjoyed them. My favorite books when I was little were books. There was a series of books called The Man of the Impossible in Egypt that featured like a Muslim superhero foiling, and exposing Jewish conspiracies all the time. And these are the kinds of things that I enjoyed as a child, and I completely believed that view. And unfortunately, so many other people still do till today.
And it's incredible for me, really, because Egypt was the first Arab country that Israel signed a peace deal with.
Right.
And at the time, I don't think people expected things to change overnight, but you're talking about growing up from 1989. Certainly by then,
right.
We thought that things may have thought a little bit more. Was that the case at all? How were things sort of post-peace treaty Egypt?
Right. Well, that's a question that I get a lot because people do not expect this amount of pervasive anti-Semitism to exist in Egypt till today. Well, after the peace treaty of Egypt, there was some sort of a serious effort. Like there was actually, under the Sadat regime, there was some serious effort to try to kind of normalize the situation a little bit and to demystify Israel and demystify the Jews. But it seems after the assassination of Sadat in 1981 by Islamist extremists, the Egyptian government decided to really roll back on a lot of those plans that they had to kind of culturally normalize with Israel, out of fear that the populace doesn't really want this right now. And ironically, things seem to have gotten worse since the 80s and the 90s, from everything that I've studied and from what I've heard from people. And this has several reasons. And I think one of them was just a rising, religiosity in the Muslim world in general. And Egypt was also part of this, as we know, in major cities across the Muslim world. For example, we know in the 60s and the 70s, not as many women used to cover their hair as they do today. So there was a rising sense of religiosity that Islamist extremism kind of penetrated into society with. And the cause, or the main banner, or the main recruitment tool for Islamist extremism till today was always this issue of, the Palestinian cause and that animosity and hatred towards Israel. So that also kept rising. That's a part of the issue. Another part of the issue is the behavior of the Egyptian state as well. So anti-Semitism is actually quite useful of a tool. It allows societies to find a scapegoat, a convenient scapegoat, the Jews, and to deflect all of their problems and all of their issues on the Jews. So if we are having problems, we're having economical problems, we don't have, we don't have, democratic governments, we have terrible human rights conditions, so on and so forth. We don't have healthy political systems, we have security issues. Well, it's because of Israel, it's because of the Jews. So anti-Semitism allows, unfortunately, Arab governments, including the Egyptian government, to harness and cultivate a sense of collective paranoia in order to get people united together behind the government, in order to control the opposition. And you often see that in a country like Egypt. If there is an opposition figure that the government feels that threatening, the main accusation that they will level against him would be that he must be working for the Jews. He must be an agent. He must be working for Israel. And this kind of sense of paranoia is, unfortunately, one of the main tools that the regime in Egypt has been using for stability. So even though the Egyptian state did sign a peace treaty with Israel, it seems that they wanted kind of to have their cake and eat it too. So they wanted to have good relations with Israel, but at the same time, they did not want to lose the unifying effect of the paranoia, the anti-Semitism, the hatred. And so they've been basically double dealing. So they have those good security relations and coordinations with Israel, but at the same time, you will still have the official Egyptian national TV broadcasting some very anti-Semitic content. I remember a few years ago, or a video, like there's a video online from 2019, 2018, I think, of one of my former professors, a Hebrew professor, ironically, going on Egyptian national TV, a TV that's sponsored and paid by the government, and talking about how, Israeli evil and Israeli aggression is just part of Jewish genetics, that Jews can't help it because it's in their genes. And touting this kind of Nazi racial theory on an official Egyptian national TV is not really a rare occasion, unfortunately. Back to you, Michael.
And so you've got this pervasive environment of anti-Semitism. It's on TV for all different ages. It's in school, it's in academia. How are you able to change your mind? You clearly did. What was your journey?
Well, honestly, it wasn't my plan to change my mind. I didn't start this with a sense of curiosity. You know what? Let me examine if this is true or false. I completely believed that this is true. I completely believed, I had a righteous mind. I believed that, I'm on the side of the righteous cause, and that Israel is nothing but pure malevolence, and the Jews are nothing but a bunch of conspirators and just wicked people who are trying to destroy the world. I completely and utterly believed it. I didn't question it one bit at all. So I didn't try to question my beliefs. I actually wanted to learn more about the Jews because of that obsession. It was a complete obsessive neurosis, kind of, that I'm constantly obsessed with Israel, constantly obsessed with the Jews. So it's, for me, it was about learning about those fantastical, orcs, those evil creatures. I wanted to learn everything I could so I can defeat them. And that was kind of the fantasy that I lived in. I was a nerd. I am still a nerd. And I just sat behind my computer in my room, most of the time, and I obsessed over those fantasies. And I wanted to be, in this eternal celestial battle between good and evil. I wanted to be a part of this glorious battle. So I decided I will teach myself Hebrew, which is, it's like the dark language of Mordor. It's like the language of those evil people. And I thought in my mind, once I know Hebrew, once I know everything about them, I'll be able to decode their evil plans. I'll know what they are up to, and I'll be part of this amazing battle. And I was about 14 at the time. And to give you also some context, at that age, so we're talking about the year 2004, 2005. That was right after, during that time, the global war on terror had just started. The United States started a war in Afghanistan, a war in Iraq. The second intifada was going on in the Palestinian territories. So in the Arab world, things were very inflamed. You turn on the TV, Al Jazeera, for example, and they are telling you, Muslims are being killed everywhere. Muslims are being killed in Afghanistan and Iraq by the Americans, in Palestine by the Jews. And they give you just a sense of it's almost an apocalyptic event, right? And I felt, it's my duty. I have to engage. And this is why I decided to do that. So I went online, taught myself Hebrew. My English got better with time as I was reading. And then I started to read, Jewish history. I got the Bible and I started to read it in order also to discover, the Jewish religion and the Jewish faith and Jewish beliefs. I started reading, Hebrew or literature. I started reading for the first time ever about the Holocaust. And I was shocked to find or to encounter a narrative that is very, very different than the narrative that I had in my mind. Because the story of Jews as this kind of historic super villain nation that's been around for thousands of years, amassing, unimaginable power and wielding it against the good of all people. That story couldn't be more different than the story of Jews as a small, hated, and persecuted minority that's been expelled, exiled, murdered, century after century, decade after decade, continent after continent. It's just that both stories are completely different. They are completely irreconcilable. And at the beginning, I didn't believe the news stories that I read. I thought, oh, that must be the Zionist propaganda that everybody's been warning me of. But as time went by, these news narratives explained reality much better. The story of Jews, not as some alien, European race that invaded the Middle East and destroyed Palestine and stole it and killed the people, but the story of Jews as an indigenous Middle Eastern nation. Everything about the Jews is indigenous to the region, their language, their culture, their genetics, their history. The story of the Jews as I said, a minority that was hated and was subjected to terrible cruelty and terrible senseless hatred for nothing they've ever done. I started reading literature around the Holocaust, mainly Primo Levi's amazing book, If This Was Man, and of course, Elie Wiesel. And the great thing about good literature and good writing, that it transfers emotions to you. It makes you feel experiences that you would never experience in your own life. And reading those books, I felt the agony, I felt the anguish of losing everything and everyone you have in your life just because you were born Jewish. And that realization or that education that I actually got by accident completely transformed who I am. And I started looking at Jews and Israelis in a very, very different light, not as some sort of demons and the epitome of evil, but as humans and as people. And even at the beginning, if I didn't know what to think of Israel, I completely still was able to humanize Israel and completely humanize the Jews. And that completely changed the person that I was and led to the person that I am today.
And you're clearly an incredibly empathetic individual and somebody who seeks out the truth. And obviously, that's an amazing thing. what were the repercussions then of you kind of getting this new found view of what Jews are like and what Israel is like? What happened next?
Um, it was not an easy journey. First of all, I felt completely alienated from my surroundings, because I knew that now I believe in something nobody else around me, believes in. I knew that there is now a huge gap that kind of separates me from everyone. And I really didn't talk to anybody about it because I didn't know where to begin. It's extremely, for a lot of people, it's completely unimaginable. I mean, everybody grew up with this narrative. Their parents believe in it, their teachers believe in it, the mosques, say it, the TV. So for me to come, especially a teenager, basically, try to tell them, you know what? No, I think you're wrong. It was just completely who am I to say any of this? So I didn't really say anything. It was just it was really hard to feel so lonely. But actually, at one point, I couldn't really pretend anymore. I actually decided to do something very daring, which is visiting the Israeli Academic Center. The Israeli Academic Center used to exist, doesn't exist anymore in Egypt. It was part of the Israeli embassy. Egyptians were banned from visiting, but I decided that I wanna go there. I want to meet an Israeli. I want to meet a Jew. I want to talk to them. I want to talk to those people. And it was a very, very daring decision. And it's because of this decision that I'm sitting here today, actually. Because before that, nobody knew about what I believed. Nobody knew what I was doing. Nobody knew what I was researching. Nobody knew anything. But of course, naively, I didn't think that, the Israeli Academic Center is under surveillance. It was just an obvious idea, but it didn't cross my head. And just after I visited and I met Jews for the first time in my life. I was very happy to speak Hebrew. At that point, I spoke fluent Hebrew, but never actually spoken to anybody.
Self-taught, right? Self-taught Hebrew.
Self-taught, yeah. And then walking out of the building, I was stopped by an officer of Egyptian state security, which is kind of the equivalent of the NSA in the United States or the Shabak in Israel. And from that moment, basically, then the government saw me. Like I was invisible before I decided to visit the Israeli Academic Center. Now I wasn't. They questioned me. Why was I there? Why did I visit? And then they started basically calling my friends, asking questions about me. And then one day they called me to threaten me about what they would do to me if I don't stop going to the Israeli Academic Center, if I don't stop trying to talk to Jews or Israelis. I was terrified. But I actually wasn't deterred for some reason, maybe because I was young and reckless. So I went online and I wrote about what happened. It was picked up by Ynet, and then they wrote about it. There's an Egyptian student in Israel who is being persecuted in Egypt, who's being persecuted for his interest in Israel. That article changed everything. After the article came out, 3 days after it came out in January 2010. You can still find it on Ynet if you Google it. State security comes to our house. They arrest me. They arrest my father. My family had no idea about what I was doing in my life, but now my family knew that something was off. The government released us. Eventually, my father promised that the family is going to take care of this, but then the family made an intervention, and they asked me, what's wrong with you? So I couldn't lie about my new acquired belief, which was a huge problem for the family. They ostracized me. From that point, I lost my family. And then this entire episode started an unfortunate series of interactions with security agencies who actually suspected that I was a spy. They actually suspected that I must be a Mossad agent, I must be a Zionist agent. There's no way that I'm doing the things I'm doing, trying to talk to Israelis on my own. They must be paying you. And that led to the most difficult time in my life, which was 2 months and a half that I spent in the custody of Egyptian military intelligence at the end of 2010. They suspected that I was an actual spy, and they interrogated me. It was a terrible time. They beat me in the cell every day. You Jew lover, where are those Jews, where are those Jews who are going to help you now? Nobody's going to help you now. And it was just absolutely difficult. And I was released in the end of 2010 in December. And then eventually this kind of, or this kind of interaction with the government repeated itself till I had to leave in 2012 and come to the United States as an asylum seeker.
And place this in context for us, because what's happening in Egypt at the time on the political scene?
So in 2010, that was actually the last year before the Arab Spring, the last year of the rule of the former President Mubarak. But still things, they seemed stable, but under the surface, obviously, it seems that things were simmering. And even my story, I think it's a part of a story of a wider Arab generation who has access to new technology, who has access to new information, and who seeks different things. Maybe I'm a little exceptional in the terms of the area that grabbed my interest, but also it seemed that there were a lot of other Arab and Egyptian youth who's also interested in new ideas about liberalism and democracy. And that led in January 2011 to the beginning of the Arab Spring in Egypt. You had huge demonstrations. That was exactly 1 month after I was released from the custody of the military. Huge demonstrations all over the country, asking for a change in government, asking for the president to resign, which eventually did happen. And there was an atmosphere of optimism, even globally, about this new movement. And this is why it was dubbed the Arab Spring. There was some sort of an expectation that this demonstration, this protest movement actually may bring some democratic change to the Arab world. But as we saw, it seemed that the best organized groups in the Arab political theater were mainly Islamists. In Egypt, it was the Muslim Brotherhood. And in 2011, a few months after the President Mubarak was removed, we saw the Muslim Brotherhood starting to rise to power. They're starting to organize themselves, entering the elections and winning the majority of seats, passing their own constitutional amendments, and then kind of co-opting all of the old institutions to serve their purposes. And then all of a sudden in 2011, things started to even get worse. So anti-Semitism started to get significantly worse. There was one day, I think in August 2011, I don't know if you remember, when thousands of Egyptian demonstrators tried to attack the Israeli embassy in downtown Cairo. You see horrific videos on YouTube of the incident with people taking sledgehammers, basically trying to knock down the walls in order to lynch those Israelis hiding inside. This was not a sudden spike of violence. This was due to the intensifying anti-Semitic rhetoric that the different Islamist groups, mainly the Muslim Brotherhood, has been employing. Violence against Christians became worse. And then we see that that sense of inflamed religious zeal is getting even more intense, more powerful, and taking control over the political system. And it was then when I knew that it will be hard for me to stay, because even among, and this is another part of how hard this is. So even in the protest movement, there were some liberal groups, but even those liberal groups were not sympathetic to the cause that I had. And that's something that is unfortunate with what we consider Arab secularists or Arab liberals, who most of them lean to the left. Most of them, as you know, even in Israel, Arab parties usually tend to be socialist. They will champion anti-Islamist causes. They will champion, some secular values. But when it comes to Israel and the Jews, they will kind of have a very, very similar position, if not identical, to even Islamists. So even among those groups, I couldn't have any sympathy. So I knew whatever trouble I'm in the government, no one is going to help me. If you are an opposition figure, let's say if you're a dissident who writes about, human rights violations, and the government arrests you, you're most likely to have some opposition groups, championing your freedom, making a campaign for your release. But for people like me, nobody's going to make a campaign for my release. People think of me as a spy. He's defending Israel. Who's going to defend me? So that was extremely difficult, and I had to leave.
Talk about your ongoing journey. I want to bring in a few questions from people who are asking online right now. Itai Green is saying, were all your friends and those around you as obsessed with Israel as you were?
No, so here's the thing. So a lot of people grew up learning about all of this, but thankfully not everybody, goes to their everyday life obsessed with it. They believe the stories. That's what they think. Jews are evil, Israel is evil, but they have their day-to-day life. And that's actually a good thing, that most people, despite the fact that they believe in in that fantasy, they really don't pursue that obsession in every day. So around my own friends, so I had friends who believe these stories, who think I'm absolutely crazy, but they don't really care that much, and they think I'm their crazy friend, right? Like, how when he's our crazy friend. They don't believe I'm right. They believe that Israel is terrible and they are murdering Palestinians that are drinking their blood every day. But they really don't care. They want to get a job. They want to find a girl. They want to just pursue their own life. Some were, and unfortunately, it's usually had to go hand in hand. And that's really unfortunate, with religiosity. Like the more a person committed to, the faith or going to mosque, the more you will find him quite antagonist or quite obsessed with this issue. And I did lose quite a bit of friends the moment that I made my views known to others. But not everybody is obsessed. I would say that Christians, specifically in Egypt, despite the fact that they grow in the same amount of anti-Semitism, because it's just around them everywhere, they are far less obsessed with it, and they are actually the most likely to change their views once you question them. And actually, I'm happy to say that through all of my Christian friends that I have from Egypt, I was able actually to educate them on this issue specifically, and even to pursue some of them to actually talk to their own family or their own priest about making sure that this kind of hatred is not propagated inside their own communities.
That's amazing. You made it to Israel for the first time a couple of years ago. I know, because I hosted you.
You were there, yeah.
It was great. Tell us about that experience. I mean, you learned, you'd opened your mind to Israel, you understood it was not what you had been told it was, but then you're coming for the first time. What was that like?
Yeah, it was amazing. First of all, it was so by 2018, I've been teaching Hebrew for several years, as you know, living in the United States, doing public speaking about Israel, but never been to Israel once. And that because of the, complications that I didn't have a passport. I was a refugee in the United States. But in 2017, I became a United States citizen, which I'm extremely proud of. And then I finally had a passport. I can go to Israel. And it was extremely weird to go to a country that changed my life so much. And actually, without ever being there, like I never stepped a foot there, and like it completely transformed my life. I remember landing there, not knowing, what to expect. But the moment I land there, I feel completely comfortable. I feel completely at home. I see everything good about Middle Eastern culture, everything good that I love about the Middle East. That, Israel is very Middle Eastern. I see the warmth of people. I see the passion of everything they do. The food I like, the smells I like, just the energy I like. However, with freedom, you experience the Middle East with complete freedom, whether you're a man or a woman, a Jew or a Muslim or a Christian, gay or straight. And that experience I never had in my entire life. I've never been in a culture that is so much like my own, that makes me comfortable, makes me home. But I'm not afraid to say what I think. I'm not afraid to say who I am. I'm not, and I treat with everybody respectfully, and everybody treats me respectfully. It was absolutely beautiful. I went to Jerusalem, and then I understood why everybody is crazy about Jerusalem. I walked down the streets, down the alleys, and you feel that amazing, spiritual energy. You feel the commitment of people, the admiration that people have for everything there. I went to Tel Aviv, and I saw this amazing, innovative Middle Eastern Mediterranean city that is just absolutely mind-blowing. I talked to people. I made just friends randomly in the street. And then actually the day that I landed on was Independence Day. And I had no idea how crazy Israelis are on Independence Day. And then I go down the street and just everybody's on the street, everybody's dancing, everybody's happy. And it made me understand how important Israel is, and why do people love Israel the way they do, and why do people admire Israel the way they do, and why Israel is important to defend, because of the things that Israel represents, because of that moment of happiness, because the triumph of life over death, that despite all what happened to the Jewish people throughout their long history of persecution and hatred, it's just unbelievable the amount of, torment and agony that they've been subjected to. But yet they don't live in that. They don't dwell in that. They move on. They choose life, and they choose dignity for them, for their children, for their grandchildren. And that taught me a lot. I have to say, Israel and Zionism taught me a lot of values that are not really easy to live by. The value of doing things for yourself, of not waiting for others, to get up, and if you want something, if you want to make your life better, you get up and do and go and make your life better. And those are hard values to live by, but I always try.
It's incredible. I wonder, there must be many people watching this at home and thinking, how can we create an atmosphere where there are more people like Hussein? And I know this has crossed your mind. Let's talk about you speaking to different groups in a moment, but first, there's social media. There's maybe more access now to information than there's ever been, even in more closed societies. How do we create that kind of atmosphere so that, there are young boys and girls growing up in Egypt and similar countries that can get the kind of more well-rounded view of Israel that you did?
Yeah. Well, thankfully, as you said, technology is changing everything. Now on social media, you have this new platform that exists in different languages that offers new perspectives to people. And as you know, we at Stand With Us, we've been doing this. We're one of the biggest pro-Israel social media presence in terms of Arabic on Facebook, on Instagram, on Twitter. We have hundreds of thousands of followers and people who see the things we do and read the things that we post. And that's basically the way to do it, because this problem, when I hated Jews, and people have to understand this, when I hated and obsessed with Jews, I remember a time during the Second Intifada, I was at school, and I had my best friend who was another nerd. His name was Amr. And we used to sit, in recess together. And, we used to play all the time. We loved the Power Rangers. I was the red, Ranger. He was the blue Ranger. We were kids playing.
At the time that the guy who invented the Power Rangers was Israeli.
Yeah, and I didn't know at the time, yeah. And we're playing all the time. And I remember one time we were sitting in recess and talking about, during the Second Intifada, there were a lot of suicide bombings, as you know. And then we're talking about those things that we see on TV. And actually, I remember both of us thinking together, if we do a suicide bombing to kill Jews in Israel, how would we do it? And I remember us thinking, we can do 2 consecutive bombs in the same place. So the second person would kill all the, ambulance workers and the rescue workers and all of it. That's I thought about this when I was 12 or 13. And I wasn't being evil. Like, I wasn't Osama bin Laden. I wasn't, al-Baghdadi from ISIS, the mastermind sitting and just planning how to destroy the world. I thought that this was good. Like, I thought that this what goodness is. So the problem of anti-Semitism and hating Jews and hating Israel is a lot of it is about ignorance. It's complete ignorance. It's misinformation and the complete lack of information. And the only true solution of this is education. There is no other way around it. Of course, you have to, have good security solutions. You have to protect yourself and protect your kids. But any long-term solution has to be based on changing people's minds and actually giving people a chance to transform who they think they are and to transform into their own lives into a better life. So if you want to help, you have to engage with education. You have to educate yourself, and you have to help educate others, and you have to engage with others, and you have to have a voice, and you have to tell people about your opinions, and you have to tell people what you think. And this is I love what we do at Stand With Us. We go to people, we go to campuses, we go to high schools, we go to communities, we go to synagogues, we go to churches, and we talk to people. We talk to people, we take their questions, we post, we make content online, and this is how you change people's minds. This is how you educate people, because it's a long, painful, slow process. There is no magical bullet. There is no magical switch. There is no the perfect comment that you will type in and press enter and boom, you're going to change people's minds. You have to be persistent, you have to be patient, and you have to be persuasive, and you have to be educated, and you have to be educating. So engage with people, engage with educational organizations that are trying to do this and change this reality. If there is one thing, Jews are good at many things, but one of the best things that Jews have been historically good at is education, being an educated people, and helping educating the world. The best selling book in our history, is a Jewish book, and I think that tells us a lot. So I think engaging and not being quiet and not being silent and having your voice is very, very important.
It's so important what you're saying, and I've had the privilege of being with Stand With Us for the last 14 years almost. And if you would have told me back in the day that our second most viewed language in social media would be Arabic, I would have been amazed. But the truth is, we were quick to pioneer on it. And what we found was this, I guess we shouldn't have been surprised, this thirst for knowledge and information, and real video and facts, because people, I guess, understand when they're being fed something that is not the truth.
Right.
And if they go through that process, and obviously it's a long process as you outline, they can change. And that's really speaks to your story. So tell us what it was like then to be in America and go and speak to different groups of people. What was the reception you got all across the board, from people who love Israel to maybe people who are much more hostile?
I will, but before I do, to follow up on the thing of social media, of course, there's a lot of thirst for information, because also that's another part of that the obsession generates. People are obsessed, so that's good. They want to know, and if you give them something, that people will take it. People will have this curiosity, and actually, currently, people are following our pages in Arabic and the pages of the Israeli Ministry of Foreign Affairs in Arabic for information about the coronavirus, how to combat the coronavirus, because they trust Israeli medicine, they trust Israeli knowledge, they trust the competence of the Israeli institutions more than their own governments. And they go on our own page on Arabic, and we keep posting about this, what's going on in Israel regarding the coronavirus, what are the steps that Israelis are taking. And they can see the comments from people in the Arab world who are interested in the information and trying to learn how to do it for themselves. And that's just, it's absolutely fascinating. Now, about talking to different groups is something that I take a lot of pleasure in, because I know, especially here in the United States, there is very little information about, the nature of problems in Arab societies, what exactly goes on. And also, a lot of Americans do not expect that this level of, classical hateful racism still exists anywhere. And when you tell people that, when you tell people about, what's going on on Palestinian TV, in Palestinian schools, in Palestinian textbooks, not just by the Hamas, but also by the Palestinian authorities. When you show them the videos, from Palestinian TV celebrating martyrdom and making children recite those poems about death, and people are completely shocked. And it's really important then to try to take that shock and transfer it to an action, to make people passionate about this. Well, this is terrible, but that's not the end of the line. This is not just this is not an inevitable result. This can be changed. You can actually have a part in this. And it's really important to actually give people a way to try to help you in doing what you're doing. Talking in the United States is tricky because, of all of the political correctness atmosphere. Also now on campuses, the BDS movement and the very active different anti-Israel groups target, events like Stand With Us events, or, target speakers like myself in order to stop us from talking on campuses. And that makes things very, very difficult. So it really depends on campus and how like reaction I get. It depends on the campus. It depends on how active that campus is in terms of anti-Israel activities. I got yelled at some schools before. I got events canceled before. But also I got people, you know, who just attended and asked me questions and didn't agree with me, and that was fine. So it really differs. But for the most part, I really like going on campuses and finding the Jewish students who don't want to speak up because they're afraid, and help them and empower them in order to speak up. Because I think that is what matters to me the most, because they remind me of myself. They remind me when I was alone in Egypt, when the atmosphere was very hostile, and I had those ideas. I knew differently, but I couldn't say anything because I was afraid of the repercussions. There's a big difference, of course, but still, people are afraid. Jewish students are often afraid on campuses of speaking up against those groups. And this is why what we do at Stand With Us is very important, is to go to empower those students, give them the information that they need, give them the education that they need, send them the speakers that they want. And not just that, give them the legal help in order to fight for their rights, and not to let their rights be taken away from them by, you know, anti-Israel and anti-Semitic professors, as we see, unfortunately, on many campuses. So I personally enjoy it. I hope that one day we don't have to do this work. I hope that one day we can, you know, we can all be without a job and Stand With Us and go try to find other jobs, because thankfully anti-Semitism doesn't exist anymore. But as long as anti-Semitism exists, as long as we have to go out there, we have to speak to people, we have to speak to different groups, we have to build alliances, not just Jews, but everybody who wants to help the world to become a better place.
And it's worth mentioning that, you know, even in these times when a lot of people are on lockdown, a lot of people are at home, those campus programs, those high school programs, our work with our legal network of pro bono attorneys who help fight against BDS cases and help support pro-Israel voices and help push back against anti-Semitism. Those programs are still all happening. They've just gone online. And it's been amazing. I know you've been involved with them. We have over here as well. It's been amazing to see those programs continuing and going so strong, because there's a community of people, and there's something very powerful, even when you're alone, to feel part of a community where you can represent many different diverse voices, but stand for something very similar. So these programs have been able to bring people together even in these times now. I wanted to ask you, when you take a look at the Middle East right now, what's your view as to how things are? I know you're a writer, you're an analyst, as well as an activist. Are things changing for the better? Do you see things shifting, things moving, attitudes politically? What's your view?
There are a lot of major shifts that are taking place right now, have been taking place for the past actually few decades. I mean, it's really kind of spit off exponentially the last decade with the Arab Spring. But there are huge shifts in regards to attitudes towards Israel, and just politically and socially in the region in general. And this is due to, you know, a myriad of circumstances and different reasons. When it comes to Israel, as we can see that there is an actual big shift, it seems, in the relationship between Israel and other Arab countries. Primarily, we're talking about Saudi Arabia, we're talking about Gulf countries who seem to be interested in actually opening channels of cooperation with Israel. And it's happening so fast, I think, that people are shocked about what's going on. I mean, every once in a while we see these developments by, you know, the Emiratis are going to start letting holders of Israeli passports in. You see Saudi Arabia saying that in the case of a war with Iran, they will let the Israeli Air Force use their airspace. You see all of those different news reports that just tells you that something is going on. And from my experience and from the things that I know about the region and the people that I can talk to, I think there is a genuine interest within those countries, primarily the GCC countries and Saudi Arabia, to actually normalize relations with Israel. And this has to do with primarily two issues. One of them is mainly the confrontation with Iran, because those countries know that Israeli military power on their side will be a guarantee in any sort of, you know, confrontation against Iran. Those countries are scared of Iranian influence and Iranian power. I mean, if you think about it, Iran today controls, you know, Beirut, Damascus, Baghdad, and Sana. We're talking about 4 Arab capitals that surrounds the heart of Arabia, Saudi Arabia and the GCC. They take this very seriously. They are aware of the predatory and imperialist aspirations of Iran in the region. And they are interested in having this alliance with Israel in order to confront Iran. That's the first reason. The second reason, and I think it's very, very important, could be even more important than the confrontation with Iran, is that for the longest time, since the 1950s, the issue with Israel, or the animosity, or the confrontation with Israel, or the anti-Israeli tendencies, has been used to recruit for several movements. It was used to recruit for Pan-Arabism when Pan-Arabism was alive till the end of the 1960s. And then after the decline of Pan-Arabism, it became the main tool of recruitment for different Islamist groups. The biggest Islamist groups is in the Middle East, as we know, in the Arab world, is the Muslim Brotherhood. Hamas is a Muslim Brotherhood organization. I mean, Iran has an Islamist project as well. So you can see here that this animosity, the promise to liberate Palestine, to free Palestine and end the state of Israel, has been always touted by the Islamist project as their main goal. And it's been very successful in cultivating those feelings, the emotional feelings that people have about Israel and the Palestinians in order to recruit people into their causes. And it seems that those states, many states in the Arab world today, have realized that this kind of hatred towards Israel no longer serves their purposes, and actually it serves the purposes of those Islamist groups whom they are threatening those governments themselves. We saw how the Muslim Brotherhood tried to overtake the government in Egypt. The same thing, I mean, they would try to do that in many other Arab countries. So I think the Arab countries realized that this animosity, this idea, this, conflict with Israel is not serving them anymore, and it's serving people who want to replace them. So I think there is a realization that this rhetoric needs to be controlled. This idea of animosity needs to end in order to create a better, stable reality, political reality in the Middle East. You saw in Saudi Arabia how, for example, this year, the first year ever, Saudi Arabia sent the Secretary General of the World Muslim League. Now, the World Muslim League is the biggest Islamic organization in Saudi Arabia. They sent the Secretary General of the Muslim World League to Auschwitz for the first time ever in order to recognize he recognized the Holocaust. He recognized that 6 million Jews were murdered there. And you can see that those steps are being made steadily in order to diffuse the situation and change the reality. Other than the issue with Israel, you see all of those shifts. You see that there is a decline in political Islamism in general. You see that there is a decline in the affinity for Iran in general. You saw demonstrations in Lebanon. You saw demonstrations in Iraq against Iranian influence, many times with a lot of Shia Arab participation, who are now understanding that Iran truly has predatory interests in their countries. And hopefully those movements with time will grow in order to create new non-sectarian political systems in those countries.
It's amazing to think of a time when Israel had great relations with many of these countries, and the possibility that could happen again. It's only going to happen with voices like yours being heard, that we know, to encourage these people along. I want to bring in some of our audience who've been sending in questions from actually all around the world. This one comes from Georgia. She's in Verona, Italy. And she says to you, when you're in America, do you feel there's the same kind of vitriolic anti-Semitism among some Muslim groups in America as well? If yes, do you feel that anti-Semitism is increasing as she feels it is in the rest of the world?
Well, I meet a lot of Muslims in the United States. I do not, honestly, especially the ones who grew up here, I don't see this amount of kind of vile, straightforward hatred. There could be some typing. There could be some, a milder form of it, but definitely not in the way that we see in Middle East and Arab media and television and newspapers and all of that. However, I do often see some recordings of some mosque imam. For example, there was a imam in Davis, California, who had this famous sermon when he was praying for the destruction of all the Jews. You had the video from the Muslim Society in Philadelphia when they had American Muslim children singing about beheading the treacherous ones who occupy Jerusalem. So there is no doubt that this level of anti-Semitism does exist. I think proportionally it is definitely less significant than it is in other parts of the world, mainly in the Arab countries. You can see it. However, you can see the obsession with Israel in the behavior in notable Muslim activists and Muslim American figures. You can see it in the activism of Linda Sarsour. You see it in the on the actions of the two congresswomen, unfortunately, Rashida Tlaib and Ilhan Omar. There was a recent picture of Rashida Tlaib. I think she was holding some sort of a book, and she was wearing a shirt that has the entire map of Israel on it, and it says Palestine. And it's really, really unfortunate that we have somebody in the United States Congress that says that. However, she would never say that openly, and that shows you also kind of the double speak that those people do. It does exist. That
she was talking about the two-state solution. She had an entire map which alludes to Israel's complete destruction.
Israel's complete destruction, and unfortunately, so yes, it does exist. I don't think it exists in the same. As I said, in the same open, vile way that you see it in other Arab countries. However, you see that level of obsession. You see it also in groups on campuses like, the MSA, the Muslim Student Associations, that lead a lot of anti-Israel events. You see it in Muslim groups, Muslim student groups that lead some resolutions. For example, there was one, I think it was in York University, or about banning kosher food because it's, kosher food has to do with Israel. And you see all of these kind of examples. So it definitely does exist. And unfortunately, it's been actually gaining momentum on campus and off campus in the United States recently. And this what makes our mission even more pressing and more necessary and more important.
Rashi Rosenzweig is asking, how do participants of BDS and the International Solidarity Movement, those type of people, respond to you?
Well, it depends. They don't usually respond. They just deny, and they just, this is a lie. He's defending the apartheid, because we know that these movements it's pure sensationalism, right? It's not really activism. It's exhibitionism. It's just about people's emotions and throwing words that people actually don't truly know what they mean, like using the word apartheid in the way they do. But it's still really important to have your narrative out there to compete with this extremely flawed narrative that they have. They react to me with a lot of anger and accusations. He's an Uncle Tom and he's paid to say this, which is really, for me, there's nothing worse. Like, there's a difference between telling you, Michael, you're misguided. All of your opinions are wrong. You think you're right, but actually you're wrong about everything. And there's a difference between that and actually denying you the agency and denying you the possibility that you actually believe what you're saying. No, you know what? You're lying to me. You're only saying this because of the money. And that's what they do. And it's completely insulting. I mean, I'm glad they do it because it also invalidates them completely, right? Like, you're really not even giving me, the benefit of assuming that I hold really those opinions. Like, those are actually my opinion. You know what? They might be wrong, but they are my opinions. No, there is no way. It's the same thing that happened to me in Egypt. Like, it's the same exact thing that happened to me with those security agencies who actually thought I was a spy. There is no way that those are your ideas. They must be paying you. You must be a spy. And then I come here and it happens again from those BDS movements. No, there is no way you believe in this. You must be a sellout. You must be, you must be doing this for the money. And it's really unfortunate, but I think it's really important to show people the real face of those hateful groups.
Absolutely. The Neves family are asking how you like living in the United States.
Yeah, sometimes. Yeah, I love it. I love living in the United States. I mean, where else can you go to Costco and get a bag of 2 pounds of peanut butter filled M&Ms?
Well, you can't right now.
You can't right now. That's true. Yeah. No, I love living in the United States. It's a great country. Just the opportunity that I was given here, the way I was welcomed and accepted, and the way I became an American, and I love the freedom, and completely love it. I still miss home. I'm very Middle Eastern at heart. I'm very Arab, and I'm proud of who I am. I miss, our old, ancient culture that I adore, the music, the food, and that's why I always, kind of big stand with us to send me to Israel, because I just love being there.
It's an incredible place. It's a fusion between Middle East meets West.
That's true.
Certainly. All the best things, I like to think. We have Ada Elliswood is asking, what advice do you have for college students wanting to advocate for Israel and combat BDS on campus, given that many universities are more sympathetic to the Palestinian narrative?
Yeah, definitely don't be intimidated. That's the first thing that I can tell you that you have to do. Don't be intimidated by the fact that by the authority, by having those professors. I know that you're a student and they are professors, and there's a big disparity in power, and that intimidates you. Don't be intimidated. Know that you have a right to have your opinion. You have a right to advocate for your opinion, and that's what colleges are for. Colleges are for ideas. They are not for one homogenous idea that be forced on everyone. Don't shy out from telling people, from talking to people, and start being active. Go table, build alliances, reach out to other students who have the same interests as you. Reach out to Stand With Us, or groups like Stand With Us. We're going to help you. We're going to send you resources, and start talking to people. Make personal relationships. And me personally, I find personal relationships are very, very important. Even with those, I mean, it'll be really hard to do with students who are very anti-Israel. But try. Don't give up. Just try to reach out. Try to talk. Try to have the conversation, and try to be honest. Like if somebody is saying something completely hysterical and histrionic and emotional about how that the Israelis, kill Palestinian children, and they are crying, and they are doing this emotional, sensationalist, appeal. Don't be intimidated, and be genuine and say, wow, who wants that though? That's terrible. But is that true? Don't be afraid to call out lies. Don't be afraid to point out, the deception and just the misinformation that people are saying. So just be courageous and be confident in yourself and be confident in your opinion. And I promise you, it will make you a better person. And I always say this to people, that what I've done in my life, like, people look at me like, wow, it's so courageous. It's amazing that you did this. I actually benefited from it greatly, a great deal. It made me a much better person. It made me learn how to stand up for myself, how to stand up for my belief. So everything you do, everything you will say, every step that you are going to take towards you having your own voice will make you a much better person, will transform you, and will even transform those people who are around you.
It's an amazing message, and one that I hope that many people will hear. We love having you speak to audiences all across America, all across the world, because your voice is one that really should be heard. There's an amazing video we made with Hussein, summarizing his story in 5 minutes, if that's even possible. It isn't, but it's still a great video, and I urge you to check that out on Stand With Us Facebook. And what can I say? It's a thrill to have you with us on this.
Thank you, Michael.
Thank you for all that you do. I know you're extremely humble, but you're a powerful personality. You have an incredible message to give, and you also are a voice of hope in our world today. So thanks so much, my brother. Great to see you, and great to have you with us today. We appreciate it very much. Thank you, Hussein Aboubakr Mansour.
Thank you very much, Michael. It's always a pleasure being here. Always a pleasure to talk to Stand With Us followers and fans.
Thank you. We will see you next time. Now, next time on Stand With Us Connect, we have a double bill. You get 2 for 1. You get a workout session with the person named by Sports Illustrated, no less, as the Jewish Jordan, the Jewish Michael Jordan. That would be fabulous, Tommy Goodman. And he's going to be doing a workout session in your living room for the entire family with an Israeli flavor. That's happening on Thursday. And then, because Passover is coming, we have our virtual Seder. Don't miss that. We're going to be showcasing the Stand With Us staff's traditions and customs from Syria, from Morocco, from North Africa, from Europe, from Israel, here in Israel, all around the world. They'll be performing this virtual Seder for you, with you. That's happening this Thursday. And for Seder, you need Haggadah. I got Haggadah. But if you want this Haggadah, you have to act right now, because it's our last day of shipping. StandWithUs.com/shop gets you this Haggadah from ancient Egypt to modern day Israel. It's inspiring, with quotes from leaders and personalities, beautiful artwork, amazing content, and you get one copy free if you order now at StandWithUs.com/shop. You just have to pay for shipping. You'll want to order these for your family, for your friends, send them around the world. We'll ship them, but you have to order right now. So we're about to wrap up, but I want you to go straight to StandWithUs.com/shop, order this beautiful Stand With Us Haggadah, and make sure that Israel is a central part of your Seder experience this Passover. We will see you next time on Stand With Us Connect this Thursday. See you then. In the meantime, shalom from Israel.